Dear students, welcome to this lesson on Argumentative Essay Writing Part 2. In Part 1, you learned about the pre-writing strategies for argumentative essays. In Part 2, we will look at how to structure your argumentative essay and some techniques for argumentation. Now it's time to take all those ideas and structure them. The outlining phase should section your ideas into three main parts. The introduction. This is where you hook the audience and give background information on the topic. The body, which is made up of 2 paragraphs on the main arguments and facts that support them. It also contains 1 to 2 paragraphs on counter-arguments or refutations. And finally, the essay ends with a solid conclusion. And this is where you restate your stand and summarize the main points. Now you are ready to start writing your essay. Let's begin. The introduction begins with a hook, that is, an attention-grabbing statement about the topic. The hook is followed by 2 to 3 background sentences about the topic. And the last part of the introduction includes a clearly defined thesis statement, also called the claim. It is the most important part of an argumentative essay. The thesis statement clearly states the writer's position, and it is followed by reasons that support the argument. Hooks are sentences that grab the attention of the audience. Here are some useful hooks to use in your introduction. You can select the most appropriate one to suit the tone of your essay. You could use a rhetorical question. A rhetorical question is a question that's asked for effect with no answer expected. For example, how would life be if everyone looked the same? You could also use facts or statistics. For example, 93.4% of children and young people aged 7 to 18 had at least one role model. The most popular role models were moms with 67.4% and dads with 60.2%. You could also use a metaphor or simile. For example, TikTok is like a magnet pulling youngsters across the world. And you could also use a quote. For example, in order to be irreplaceable, one must always be different. Coco Chanel. You can include these hooks to give an edge to your writing. Now let us have a look at an example of an introduction. Please pay attention to the way the student has hooked the reader. What sets you apart can sometimes feel like a burden, and it's not. And a lot of the time, it's what makes you great. This quote by Emma Stone sheds light on the complexity of being unique. Here, a quote has been used as a hook to introduce the topic. Indeed, with the rise in globalization and mass media in the 21st century, people are trying so hard to be like other people, but they fail to focus on being their authentic self. While there are valid instances where it is good to emulate others, there are also drawbacks to not being oneself. This part elaborates on the relevance of the issue in today's context. Thus, this essay seeks to explore both sides of the argument with the aim of ultimately demonstrating that there are both positive and negative aspects to attempting to be like other people, and that the most important thing is to find a balance between the two. Please notice that the student clearly indicates his or her claim by demonstrating that he or she would debate on both sides of the statement. Here are some techniques of persuasion that you could use in your body paragraphs. The rule of three makes use of free words or adjectives to create more impact. For example, community, identity, and stability are the three main pillars of an individual. The next one is rebuttal. A rebuttal is an argument against a point, idea, or opinion. It seeks to poke holes in or dismantle another argument. In a rebuttal, the opposing viewpoint must be presented accurately and clearly. The reasons and evidence used to undermine the opposing viewpoint must be accurate and logical. The rebuttal must be presented without personal attack and in a courteous manner. For example, I have no issues with youngsters wanting to be like the Kardashians, but many people would agree that youngsters doing extreme diet or becoming anorexic in order to look like them is unacceptable. Another persuasive technique is repetition. Repeating an idea by rephrasing it can influence the listener to accept it as being true. We can repeat the same word, phrase, or idea for more emphasis. So, am I wrong for thinking that we could be something for real? Now, am I wrong for trying to reach the things that I can't see? Here, the writer wants to emphasize on whether he or she is wrong for trying to do something. In this way, he or she is trying to persuade the reader to look at things from his perspective. Now we move on to the structure of the body paragraphs. The first two body paragraphs provide reasons, evidence, and explanations to support the argument presented in the thesis. Each body paragraph begins with a transition word. Next, a reason to support the thesis is stated. The reason must be followed with credible evidence that include examples, quotes, facts, and statistics. You can formulate your opinions or arguments as follows. One would agree that, some people feel that, some would disagree because, advocates of the opposite side. Let us now have a look at how a body paragraph in favor of the argument looks like. On the one hand, it can be argued that it is much better to concentrate on being oneself rather than trying to be like other people. It is important to embrace one's uniqueness, as it is often the very things that make us different that can help us to stand out and be successful. As Dr. Suss rightly points out, why fit in when you were born to stand out? Indeed, every individual has his or her own perspective, largely fueled by his or her experiences. For instance, nobody is going to make the same choices that we make. Every good and bad experience, every moment of strength and weakness, every triumph and failure, every bit of knowledge and wisdom we acquire is the willingness to accept, learn, and think outside the box. Therefore, being unique is a wonderful feeling, especially in a world where many people struggle to be themselves. It is very important to create a flow when writing the body paragraph. You will notice that the student has used the transition word on the one hand to kickstart his or her paragraph. It highlights his stand on the topic and his first argument. The student has also used the word indeed for emphasis and for instance to give an example, and therefore to conclude the first argument. Please note that the student has also used a quote to add credibility to his or her argument. Now let's move to paragraph 2. Furthermore, trying to be like someone else can lead to the comparison trap, in which people become consumed by the idea of not being good enough, as they cannot reach the levels of the person they are trying to emulate, hence creating low self-esteem. Additionally, 49% of teenagers feel pressure to conform to look good, which impacts their self-esteem negatively. It was also reported that 75% of girls with low self-esteem reported engaging in negative activities such as disordered eating, cutting, bullying, smoking, or drinking. Hence, attempting to be someone else can lead to feelings of emptiness and dissatisfaction and can have serious repercussions on one's life. This paragraph makes use of two percentages as statistics, starting with teenagers and then moving specifically to how girls who have low self-esteem engage in negative activities. Here the use of statistics adds authenticity to the argument and gives it more weight. Now let us move to the counter-arguments. On the other hand, it can also be argued that there are certain situations in which it can be beneficial to emulate other people. For example, if someone is willing to learn a new skill, then it can be helpful to observe how others do it and then try to replicate their success. They use this in many fields, such as music, cooking, and even at school. In fact, the earliest model of learning for the artist was primarily one of imitation and of the master and apprentice relationship. They started by imitating their teachers and then gradually developed their skills. In fact, people use mirroring as a kind of universal signal. In order to survive and evolve, humankind had to learn and invent many things, including socially accepted behavior. Here the student has started his paragraph with an interesting transition word by using "on the other hand." It goes in line with the other transition word "on one hand" used earlier. Here the student has used elaboration as a persuasive technique to enhance his writing and make it more convincing. Now let us have a look at body paragraph 4. Similarly, emulating others can be a positive way to establish rapport with others. The saying by Saint Ambrose, "When in Rome, live as the Romans do, when elsewhere, live as they live elsewhere," reflects this well. This is especially beneficial while traveling or interacting with people from abroad. In fact, mimicking their rites and customs helps us to blend in easily. It also marks respect for others. Hence, it can be argued that attempting to be like others can help us to grow and develop compassion and understanding. Here, the student has made use of a quote by St. Ambrose, followed by elaboration on the idea to give more weight to his argument. The conclusion is the final paragraph of an argumentative essay. The conclusion is your final chance to leave an impression on the reader. It restates the thesis or main argument and summarizes the reasons that support that thesis. Then it ends with a strong statement about the topic. Please note that the concluding paragraph should not introduce new reasons or evidence to support the writer's position. Let us have a look at an example of a conclusion. Here the student has started his conclusion by restating the main argument. That is, to conclude, it is evident that there are both positive and negative aspects in attempting to be like other people. Then the student proceeds by summarizing the key points. While fitting in allows one to blend in with everyone else, being different allows one to be more unique and creative. Although attempting to be like someone else can lead to feelings of emptiness and comparison traps, it can also be beneficial in certain situations, such as when we are learning a new skill. And finally, the conclusion ends with a final statement to create an impression or leave an impact on the reader. Ultimately, the most important thing is to find a balance between the two, as this will ensure that we can take the best of both worlds and use it to become the best version of ourselves. The last sentence provides closure for the reader while reminding him or her of the importance of being unique. It accomplishes this by giving a final note that we need to find a balance to become the best version of ourselves. It is very important to keep a few minutes for revision at the end. Look out for verb tenses, grammatical mistakes, sentence structure, and punctuation. But more importantly, please check whether you have answered the question. Ask yourself whether you gave enough examples. Have you used the appropriate persuasive techniques? Have you been able to convince your audience? Remember that your essay should not include emotional reasons or an angry tone. Don't use words if you do not know their meaning and usage. Avoid contracted forms like didn't, couldn't, etc. We've reached the end of this video. Let us have a quick recap on how to write an argumentative essay. First of all, choose a topic and underline the key points. Take a stand. State whether you agree or disagree. And remember that an argumentative essay must have a balanced argument. Brainstorm on the topic and jot down your ideas. List the positive points and the negative points. Then choose the three strongest arguments. Once you have your 3 points, you can structure your essay. Write the introduction. Remember to use hooks to grab the attention of the reader. And then write the body, which is made up of arguments in favor of the statement and counter-arguments. Remember that you must give the opinion, followed by the explanation and support with evidence. Then write your conclusion. Please note that you should not include any new ideas in the summary. And finally, do keep some time to revise. Dear students, we have come to the end of this lesson. I hope you are now more confident to write your argumentative essays. Until we meet again, goodbye.